بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This past weekend, the brother Hanif Davis had put together an online conference that called the 5-2 Initiative. It's run by the 5-2 Initiative. And there were some technical difficulties with Facebook. We were supposed to do a Facebook Live video in video type of conversation, but apparently Facebook has taken away the ability to do that. So we have to, adapt, overcome a little bit, and do this a little bit different. So the topic of the conference was poverty and overcoming social ills. Pretty sure that's all of it. So basically, I'm going to talk about poverty and some ways to help change the situation of people who are low income or in poverty. And that's a very daunting task. It's a very steep hill to climb. It's definitely not something easy. What is poverty? So understand there is a textbook, governmental understanding of what poverty is. Poverty is broken down into two categories. One is relative and the other one is absolute. And relative poverty is lacking the minimum amount of income needed to, in order to maintain a standard of living that's average for the society that you're in. So that type of poverty is very relative to where you're at, the people that are around you. That's how you're gauged. That's the barometer for poverty. It's relative poverty. And then you have absolute poverty. And to put absolute poverty into layman's terms, you have nothing. You have food, shelter, clothing. All of these things are, you don't really have it. You have pockets of absolute poverty in the U.S., but most poverty is relative poverty. Technical terms, rural poverty and urban poverty. You could almost break that down into white poverty and black poverty. Again, speaking in layman's terms. Most of the rural poverty that you find is mainly white people in America. We're talking people from Appalachia, the Appalachian Mountains. We're talking about people in rural Kentucky and, those types of rural, far away from the city, isolated types of environments. And those are mainly white people that are there. And then when you speak in terms of urban poverty, you're speaking more in terms of African Americans, ghettos. And one of the big differences between those two types of the rural and the urban is that urban poverty, the people who are afflicted with that, because they're in the city, they have access to government buildings. So that means they can go and apply for EBT, food stamps. They can apply for Section 8 housing. They can apply for health care. They can apply for any government plan, job training, whatever that the government offers as assistance to these people. But these rural, these people who are afflicted with rural poverty and, they live way out there, they live many times so far away that they don't have a means to get to the city to apply for these benefits. They may not have a means to, a car, a truck. They may not have a means to even get to these government buildings, let alone knowing where they're located. So rural poverty is worse than urban poverty. The people who are rurally set in poverty, they have it bad. They have it bad. So we understand relative poverty and absolute poverty. And again, poverty in America is different than poverty internationally. For those people who have been blessed with the opportunity to go overseas, you've probably seen poverty. And poverty in many countries outside of America is absolute poverty. These people don't have, they don't know where their next meal is coming from outside of begging for it or somebody donating it for them. I've seen families when I was in Egypt, they literally lived in the trash dumps, in the trash sites, where the city garbage is collectively put, trash dumps. There's families that live there. They tunnel and make homes out of the trash in order to have a place to live, warmth, to be protected from the environment. They eat from the trash. Again, absolute poverty. And many times overseas you can find absolute poverty, whereas in America, most of the time it's relative poverty. The U.S. government has guidelines for determining what is poverty. And poverty is calculated by this benchmark, and it's called the Federal Poverty Level Guidelines, or the poverty threshold. What's the threshold for poverty? And these guidelines are used to determine the eligibility for government assistance, for housing, for food, for health care, for anything that the government has to offer for these people who are in this situation. So for one person to be considered, a family of one, you're an individual, $12,490 puts you in poverty. For a family of two, $16,910 is considered in poverty. And again, we're talking annually. We're talking 1 year. For family of three, $21,330. That family is considered to be in poverty. For a family of four, it's $25,750. Means that family is in poverty. They're at that minimum, right below that minimum amount. And so they're classified as being in poverty. So they determine this by estimating the minimum annual pre-tax income that is needed to purchase the basic necessities for life: food, shelter, clothing, and I sort of added in transportation. I think transportation is a necessity of life many times, because of like the urban environment right now in many cities is being gentrified. We can't really rely on buses anymore to get us to where the good paying jobs are, because when they gentrify communities and they move those inner city people out to the outlying communities, many times they will cut off the bus routes back into the city. So they'll stop shy of where the jobs are, or they won't come into the city at all. So I believe that transportation is a necessity for life, as far as being able to live in most places. Just like everything else, definitions of words and how we understand things, they evolve. They change over time. They change as we become smarter. It changes as we acquire knowledge and become more aware of all of the variables that are in play in reference to whatever the topic may be. So we can't just look at poverty from an economic perspective. Poverty and low income living situations, we need a more inclusive, or needed a more inclusive definition of what does poverty mean? What are the variables, or what are the reasons, or what goes into determining poverty or defining poverty? So, a more inclusive understanding is the chronic inadequacy of resources of all types to satisfy basic human needs: nutrition, rest, warmth, bodily care. Poverty is not only a material deprivation, but it's also powerlessness, lack of opportunity, and lack of choices are open to the poor to change their situation. Poverty is considered a major hindrance to any form of development, financially, educationally. I mean, the list goes on. And many times poverty is handed down generationally the same way wealth is passed down generationally. Included in this definition would be the deprivation of opportunity to learn and to obtain better employment to escape poverty. So education and the opportunity to find meaningful, or not meaningful, but gainful employment to change your economic situation many times is unavailable to these people who are stricken with poverty. So poverty, I don't think, can just be relegated to not having enough money, but it's a lack of resources, a lack of opportunity, and a lack of wealth that should be included in that definition. Another question. He said, is poverty man-made or a natural phenomenon? There has never been a society that I know of. Maybe you can enlighten me if you know. But there hasn't been a developed society that I know of where everyone was equal. Everyone had the same thing. Everyone had the same amount of land, power, resources, wealth in the given society. So there have always been those who had more than others. Even during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were rich Sahaba and there were Sahaba who were poor. Again, we're speaking in terms of material wealth, Yeah, there were Sahaba who were rich and there were Sahaba who were poor. There were Sahaba who had status. There were some Sahaba who had no status or very low status. Maybe they were a slave. So not having or having less than someone is a part of the natural order of things. Poverty, though, the poverty that we know today is different. That's man-made. How is poverty today man-made? It's made from bad economic policies of governments. That's one. Incompetent leadership. Unnecessary wars is a big one. Poor execution of decent policies. Corrupt leadership. That's a big one. And the biggest one, I think, greedy capitalists. Capitalism breeds poverty. It's very individualistic. It's very dog eat dog, every man for himself. This is the mentality that capitalism breeds. Also, in some cases, we have to talk about climate change, and we have to add in environmental devastation. We've had entire countries devastated by tsunamis, by fire, by flood, by natural occurrences that put entire populations or entire countries into a state of poverty. In America, and again, unfortunately, because I'm not doing this on Facebook, where I was going to post links. I had links that I wanted to post for some of the different things that I'm mentioning. So I'll see when I post this on YouTube if I can add links to some of the different terms and ideologies that I'm using. And one of them is neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is a prevailing ideology here in America. And neoliberalism really became popular during the era of Ronald Reagan. He's a very big pusher of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism, just to give you a elementary, definition of it, it's deregulation of everything. Deregulation speaks to safety standards on jobs. Deregulation speaks to not only safety on jobs, but what companies can do to the environment, things they can and cannot do. Neoliberalism wants to deregulate everything, basically giving capitalists full steam ahead to make money any way they can, irregardless of what it does to the environment, irregardless of or regardless to what happens to the workers. That's one aspect of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is very individualistically driven. Again, it's pure capitalism. It's making money above any and everything else, above the human condition, above the environment. So when we understand that here in America, neoliberalism is an ideology that is within our government, and the people who think in this neoliberal mentality are not really concerned with the have-nots. The have-nots are the byproduct or the latent byproduct of the system. Collateral damage, if you want to look at it that way. Okay. What we have to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned, neoliberalism is an ideology that is within the government and is capitalist driven. So therefore, there is a level of accountability there. There should be a level of accountability. So what we have to keep in mind is that it's a system in place that creates unequal outcomes, and the system is not just an abstract institution or some type of quantitative model that doesn't have accountability. The system that we live under is created and pushed and promoted by humans. So if what we have right now is creating a wider gap between those who have and those who don't, that means it's humans who can change that. It's not just some, I don't know how to put it. There's accountability there. And there is the opportunity to change. The people who preside over these systems, they make decisions that affect the rest of us. Therefore, again, there is an accountability, or there should be. Many times there's not, but there should be. The human-driven aspect of greed equals poverty is what we are battling. These systems and policies can be tweaked and modified if the rich wanted to, but they're more interested in making money. Money is the issue, and that is the point of all of this revolves around capitalism and dead hearts. Because there's no way that a person who has a healthy heart could be involved with a system or be the leadership of a system that subjugates entire demographics to poverty. This is one of the beauties of Islam, is that Islam teaches us how to take care of those who have less, by way of paying zakat yearly on our wealth, by way of some of the hadith and narrations that we have that tell us how we should view people who have less than us. It's not permissible for the Muslim to go to sleep with a full stomach, knowing that his neighbor next door is hungry. So it's almost like a war of ideologies. You know, you have neoliberalism, you have capitalism, you have all these isms, and then you have Islam. And Islam is balanced, and Islam is for the good of mankind. He asked another question. Does poverty increase crime, and how? Boy, that is a rather lengthy conversation. One thing that I'll say, when you tackle these types of issues, you find the narrative and the counter narrative. The information that I give you is not the be all end all. What I would like it to be is the beginning of a person's research. The information that I give you, and unfortunately I can't post the links, but that would have been a starting point for a person to look into these issues and to sort of come to their own conclusion. But numerous studies have shown a direct correlation between unemployment and the lack of resources and crime. Connected to that, you will normally find low educational attainment rates among the people. So you find people who have low education levels, and that extends to a lack of resource, meaning employment. Many times doors are shut, or people are relegated to menial jobs, service jobs and things like that. With that said, let's not forget though, and this is important, that crime also happens in more affluent areas. You have drugs, you have every crime that you have in the hood, you have in affluent areas. White collar crime though, white collar crime costs the society more money than street level crime. And there's a huge disparity in how punishments are handed out between white collar criminals and low income street level criminals. White collar criminals are normally white people. Street level crime many times happens in urban areas, highly policed, tend to be people of color. When we look at the urban areas, many times they're largely underfunded and have little resources. So when you couple these together, you get underground industries, drugs, bootleg this, whatever the case may be. But from what I understand, it's sort of the same in, matter of fact, it is the same in rural areas. When there's a lack of resources, when there is a lack of opportunity, lack of employment, people are going to find ways to live, out in the country, way out in, deep parts of Kentucky. You'll find the methamphetamine business is big. It's big money. Just like when you come to urban areas, drugs, crack, and all that other stuff is kind of prevalent. Heroin, all that stuff is prevalent. Those are underground industries that take the place of legitimate industries, because the legitimate industries are not available in these areas. The more unequal a society becomes, and the more income is, and this is the counter narrative. You'll find researchers like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if anyone knows him or listens to him, but he has some interesting stuff. He says that poverty or crime does not spike at the absolute poverty level. Why? Because everyone is the same. In areas where everyone is the same, everyone is equally poor, you don't find a spike in crime. He said you find a spike in crime at the relative poverty level. The relative poverty level says that the more unequal society is in income distribution, the more crime you will see. When people who don't have can see the difference in societal status, but don't have the means to change their status through legitimate means, then research shows that they will turn to crime. So when they see people who have more than what they have, but don't have the legitimate opportunity or ability to obtain income and riches and things they want, that's when they turn to crime. So that's at the relative crime level. Research also shows that when inequality isn't prevalent, then crime rates are lower. Also, we find a direct correlation in lower crime rates and higher educational attainment. And I don't mean strictly college, but that includes trade schools and certificates as well. So the higher educated you are, or the more training you have in a trade, and I don't mean training as far as working on cars with your uncle and therefore you're the hood mechanic, but I mean actually a certified mechanic. We find the less people are in poverty and the more resources that they have open to them. I hope that part made sense. Who benefits from poverty and how? There are aspects of the society that benefit from poverty or benefit from low income, low wage workers. Number one, the dirty work gets done. Low wage employment, the people cooking French fries at your local fast food restaurant, the people sweeping the floor, the people who overseas, it's the people who are nannies, the people who are street sweepers, things like this. Low wage, low income workers. Domestic work gets done, not just in hotels, but among the upper classes as well. So you'll find people are nannies, you'll find people are maids, domestic workers. Professional and business niches get created. Pawn shops, liquor stores, video poker establishments, payday loan collection agencies, lawyers on contingency for hotels and motels with weekly and monthly rates. You find hotels with these weekly and hourly rates in these low income areas. Social work profession. I mean, you figure there's always somebody benefiting from the poor, and professors who study poverty. So sociologists and people who study the poverty phenomena, they also benefit, by way of teaching and being employed in order to teach. We can't forget law enforcement. Law enforcement benefits greatly from poverty. Again, the underground industries that pop up, the drug trade, human trafficking, robbery, all the crime that's connected to not having. Law enforcement benefits from that by way of hiring more police for communities, for prisons being built, construction companies who build the prisons. They make a bunch of money. Judges, bailiffs, the whole nine. Not to mention the companies that supply materials for law enforcement, handcuffs, handcuff keys, shackles, the companies that outfit police car with cages and, weapons and bullets and holsters and body armor and, the whole nine. They all benefit from poverty. They all benefit from people who are in a situation of destitute. Low wage, again, I'll mention that low wage jobs get done and service connected jobs get done. I wanted to talk about culture of poverty too. The culture of poverty is basically the people who live in a poverty situation become so accustomed to it and the lifestyle that comes with being in poverty that it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like they stop trying to get out of the situation that they're in because it has become generational and it's such a commonplace thing. And again, I had some links that I wanted to post that I'll see if I can post them in the video. He asked the question, has poverty been used as a weapon by the elite? Well, of course. Again, when we talk about who benefits from poverty, that was the previous question. It's the elites of the society, ultimately. But then you have the other aspects of the society that also benefit. The people who work the low-wage jobs. If there was no low-wage job, they wouldn't be working. So the society, in sociology, you have conflict theory, and I'm sort of going off on a tangent now, but you have conflict theory and you have social or structural functionalism. And conflict theory is, you have the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. The bourgeoisie are all of those people who own the means of production, and then you have the proletariat, which is everyone else who works for them. And there's always that constant conflict between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Structural functionalism says that, all aspects of society play a function or play a role in making a society stable and making a society move forward. So somebody has to work the low-wage jobs. Someone has to be the person who sweeps the street. Someone has to be the person to do menial labor. So although it sucks for the poor people, they play a part in a functioning society. So poverty is it just depends on how you view it. I mean, I personally think poverty is never good. Poverty is never good. It's never good for anybody. And poverty is something that, being in America, which is a rich country, there should be no reason that people are in poverty. I understand people being poor because not everybody is going to have money. Not everyone's going to have the resources and the education, and we have 320 million or plus people here in America, so we can't expect everyone to be the same. Some are going to have more, some are going to have less. But poverty, no, there should be no reason for poverty. Ways to beat poverty is the next question. Ways to, what are practical steps to rid poverty from an individual or groups? As far as ridding poverty from groups, I will leave that to someone else. Ridding poverty from specific demographics of people, I think that is sort of, I don't want to say above my pay grade, but when we look at the individuals, we have to increase our cultural capital. What is cultural capital? Cultural capital comprises the social assets of a person, be it their education, intellect, style of speech, style of dress, that promotes social mobility in a stratified society. How you talk, how you dress, your level of intelligence, your education. These are all things that we as individuals, we can work on those. We can work on interview skills. We can work on dressing properly for interviews. I'm not putting a value on dress, but I'm talking about societal appropriateness. What's appropriate to go into a job interview? These are things that we as individuals, we can work on those. We have the power to go to YouTube. Many of us have internet, and we can turn off the entertainment stuff, and we can actually look at videos that speak to increasing our cultural capital as individuals. If each person looked to increase their own cultural capital, their own level of education, their own intellect, style of speech, how they carry themselves, this will have, I believe, an impact in the social mobility of the individuals. If all individuals in a demographic begin to think this way, then that right there will change the group situation, because you have the individuals working together or moving in the same direction. Then you have social capital. And the social capital is the network of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society, enabling the society to function effectively. Social capital. The more affluent use social capital to the utmost. Such and such is a businessman or a CEO or what, he's an attorney or whatever the case may be. His daughter or his son is set to graduate from college. Well, this man has a social network that he can call his friend or an acquaintance, someone that he's cool enough with, that he can call and say, hey, Bob, my son or daughter is graduating from college. Hook them up with a job. Oh, they're graduating? I got you. And they put them on. And that's a part of the social capital. We have to increase and have a better quality of social capital. If everybody in your social group is doing the same thing, then you have what's considered low social capital. I have people in my social network that are above me, way above me, and I have people who are below me that I consider to be below me. And I'm always looking to increase people above me, because if I need a job, if I need a letter of reference, if I need help, I have people I can go to that are above me. And the same thing, people who are economically or educationally or whatever the case may be, however you view it, may be below me in terms of social capital, then those people have access to me and what I have. My students have less social capital than I do. Therefore, they come to me for letters of reference for college. They come to me in reference to writing them letters for getting into programs, getting into different colleges and things like this. So that is a form of social capital. We need to become more financially literate. I'm talking about low income, people who may be in low income area, and I understand that when you're in poverty, it's kind of hard to focus on these things when you're living hand to mouth, but it is what it is. We need to become more financially literate and understand how money works in this country, how money moves, how to invest. We need to learn the difference between a want and a need. Yeah, I want those new Jordans. Psych, I don't wear Jordans, but as an example, I want those new Jordans, but do I need those new Jordans? If I'm in such a situation that I'm not, I'm struggling a little bit, or, maybe for once in my life, I hit a lick and made a come up and I got a little bit of extra money. Well, instead of going to buy something that you want, put that money towards something that you may need. Put it towards something that maybe your children may need. Put it toward education. Put it towards changing your living situation. Again, we need to learn the difference between a want and a need. Another thing I think we can do is we can find successful mentors, even if it's just online, and create a framework in which to begin financial change. Almost all of us have access to the internet. A mentor doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you have personal access to, but it could be someone that you pattern yourself after. You pattern financial situations. You pattern your life after. Aspects of your life, you use them as a framework for how you're going to change your situation. Another big one, there's a direct correlation between education and success. Education does not mean, or is not just relegated to college, but it also means get a trade. Some people are not academically acclimated, or not acclimated, but oriented. So some people are, love working on cars, or they want to be a carpenter or a plumber or whatever the case may be. Whatever you want to be, become certified in it. Get legitimate certification.